Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J Reels Podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits, preparing for a week to give thanks, with lots to be grateful for, as I'm blessed to have this platform to share what I love to do, talking sports with lots of robust seasoning, spice, and flavor, as this is the J Reels Podcast with your host, J Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And I'm going to start with a little bit of a different twist here. I'm not going to go to the NFL. Yes, we had the slate there yesterday. I understand the Thursday night game with the Steelers, which you know I'll unpack. But I want to start off with the college football for two reasons. Number one, Saturday was probably as wild, crazy, topsy-turvy as we've seen here over the course of the first 13 weeks. Which segues to number two, and this is where I owe college football an apology. If you've listened to the podcast, I would say as early as about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks, we'll say a month, 4 weeks ago, to where I deemed this regular season with the way it was going, how this was going to be a waste, that this was going to ruin the regular season when it comes to the college football playoff, because you had a lot of teams that were losing and teams that had already suffered a loss, not even two losses, to the point where it's like, all right, well, if Georgia loses to Alabama, this was back in September, or another team that was in the realm of not being able to suffer a second loss, whether that's an Ole Miss, an LSU, a BYU, and of course I'll get to them. A lot of these teams that even if they did have their first loss on the ledger sometime in the latter part of September, even into October, to where I said, all right, they did get a loss, tough break, tough situation, but all's going to be fine because they will probably qualify for the top 12 because they can afford to lose a game or two and therefore punch their ticket into the college football postseason for the first time being expanded to 12 teams. So how I looked at it at the time was that college football was going to be okay. College football was going to be fine. That I didn't really see a lot of drama or intrigue heading into the month of November because you had teams that, even though they had a loss and they could afford the resiliency and the flexibility to lose another game and therefore put themselves in a position to where they'll qualify. Granted, we have to see what the selection committee was going to do and how they were going to break these teams down. But how I looked at it was college football, yes, it was going to be fun. It was going to be good. Yes, you're going to have certain teams that may fall off or certain teams that may rise up. Okay. But when it's all said and done, we would think that the teams that were expected to be there were going to end up being there. And then you had Saturday. Now, I understand a lot of it is prior to what took place 48 hours ago. I totally understand. But here's where I owe college football an apology when it comes to that statement that I made about a month ago. The regular season has not ruined the postseason, because if it was going to be status quo or the teams that we would normally see there when it was all said and done, whether it be the Alabamas of the world, the LSUs, even Ole Miss, and that's what happened. The SEC has turned this whole thing into a tizzy based on what transpired there Saturday from about 12 noon to almost midnight. And it is just unbelievable to think that the season could hinge on what had taken place here this past Saturday. And of course, I'll break it all down. And to the college football gods, to the college football playoff format, even to the selection committee, which I get it, they could throw a curveball here and really change things up. But considering what had happened, I think, and we'll break it down from what I see and what the selection committee is going to take a look at come tomorrow night, it is going to be fascinating to see how this is all going to shake down. And we still have another final regular season weekend forthcoming here with the holiday starting on Friday. I know you'll have a smattering of games between tomorrow heading into the holiday weekend, but I tell you, Saturday was just unbelievable. I had my head spinning, couldn't even fathom what had taken place, and so many teams who looked like they could have been on the fringe or on the outside looking in, boy, were they just sighs of relief, and I'm sure jumping for joy knowing that the selection committee, we would think they're going to usher these teams back into the college football playoff mix, and there's going to be others on the outside looking in. So let's break it all down as we go through it, as well as the rankings. And I'll even talk about the schedule this coming weekend, because Thursday I will not have a podcast. So let me squeeze in a quick housekeeping note. No podcast Thursday, obviously with the Thanksgiving holiday and obviously it falling on a Thursday. You're not going to have a podcast, so this is the only chance you'll get me this week. But for any news, notes, shorts, happenings in sports, go to my YouTube channel at JReels. I'll also probably post some stuff on Instagram, the JReels podcast, as well as TikTok. But the nuts and bolts will be on my YouTube channel at JReels. So for those who are going to be wondering, oh, well, something happened in sports on Tuesday, Wednesday, even Thursday when I come on the airwaves here. If you're wondering what am I going to say about a certain development in sports, please go to my YouTube channel at JReels and subscribe. Please subscribe, people. I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate that, as I'm trying to expand that channel to the masses. So now let's get to it. I'm going to start off with the big game of the weekend. That was Indiana at Ohio State. And I understand the SEC was the one that certainly blew this whole thing up. But that was a huge game for the Hoosiers going into Columbus, knowing that they had to be competitive, knowing that they were going into a bit of a buzzsaw, knowing that Ohio State riding high throughout the whole year. Yes, they suffered the one loss against Oregon, a close loss at that. But they knew with Indiana coming in, this upstart, this team that literally came out of nowhere in the Big Ten to get themselves on a big stage there, 12 o'clock Fox, etc. And Indiana hung for a half. That's all there is to it. They were down 14-7. In fact, they were up 7-0 in the game. And when the game was tied, they got a key interception there deep in their own territory where Ohio State was looking to put the hammer down to take the lead. And they got an interception there, which, not to say that was going to turn the tide, but it certainly stemmed the tide for the Buckeyes to try to get to pay dirt or at least kick a field goal. But Indiana did nothing with that subsequent drive. And then the Buckeyes were able to punch it into the end zone, make it 14-7, and then here is where the whole game turned around. Indiana gets the ball, start a second half. What happens? They go 3 and out, then punt the ball, a 79-yard punt return by Caleb Downs, which made it 21-7. And right there, you thought to yourself, if Indiana does not score on this drive, and I'm not talking about a field goal, they needed to score a touchdown to at least get that deficit back to 7. What happens? They go 3 and out. Curtis Rourke, terrible day, 8 for 18. What do you have, 68 yards passing? And with the Hoosiers going 3 and out, punt the ball, 10 plays, 75 yards, touchdown Will Howard, 28-7, and that's your game. And for Indiana, I get it, the coach, Curt Cignetti, who signed that 8-year extension there about a week or so ago, said that, oh yeah, definitely that they belong in the playoff. But yes, they rightfully so do, based on them losing this game. They suffered their first loss, although this was a bad loss. If they would have lost a 38-31 game or within a score, or even let's say it was 10 points, fine. You could live with that. You could say, all right, they were competitive, not just for a half, maybe for 2.5 quarters, maybe even into the fourth quarter before things went awry. Not the case. You saw that early third quarter, the 2 3s and outs, and then obviously the punt return and the long touchdown drive, and that sealed the deal. So Indiana, they're going to get in, I would think. I know that in the rankings, they did fall from 5 to 10, which I'll discuss a little bit later on. But for Indiana, are you surprised? As a fan, I'm not. I would have been more surprised if they were in the game in the fourth quarter. Obviously, that was not the case. And here you have a scenario where I believe they're going to get in just based on the body of work. And I get it. It's a very weak Big Ten. Didn't face a lot of tough opponents. And for Indiana, you still got to give them kudos for the year that they've had. But now let's see if they go and win their final game, which we think they will, and then have an opportunity to get into the postseason, and let's see what happens. In my eyes, I hate to say it, based on what I saw against stiff competition, they're not going to be long for the postseason. They're just not. And people can say, well, Jay Reels, come on, anything can happen. Now that they got their first loss under their belt, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. Because let's just say, arguably, if they did win at Ohio State and ran the table going into the playoff, the expectations would have been through the roof for this team. And it would have been a lot of pressure for them to win that first game. And chances are that probably would have been the case. They would have read the press clippings, and that's a theme I'm going to get to a little bit later on, with another team that looks like they're going to be on the outside looking in. And for the Hoosiers, maybe this is the best thing that happened for them to regroup, reset, and then let's see what's going to happen as far as where the selection committee will place them and have that first round scenario to where they'll probably be on the road and maybe in a hostile environment, depending on where they're going to go. But Indiana certainly didn't improve anything to me that they're going to be a big-time team once the playoff begins. And now let's go through the SEC unraveling there on Saturday. I'm going to start with Alabama. You can forget about them. They're done. They suffered their third loss and a bad loss at Oklahoma. They only put up 3 points against these Sooners, and the Sooners ran roughshod in the first half, 205 yards, I believe 257 or 259 for the game. And Jalen Milroe, who I understand early on had a very good start to the year, had that big game against Texas, as we know, in late September. A lot of people thought that he was going to be in the running for the Heisman Trophy. Well, that has been long gone, and this was certainly cemented there the other night. Poor performance there, bunch of turnovers, did not have an efficient completion rate considering 3 points. That is the lowest Alabama total in forever. I believe going back to 2010, maybe 2011. That's how long that they've had an output offensively the way they did there on Saturday. And no ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. Alabama is not going to qualify, barring a miracle. And you can say that for a couple of other teams in the SEC, whether that's Ole Miss going to Florida, losing 24-17. And Florida's been a live dog here over the last few weeks. We know about the Georgia game where, yes, Carson Beck did throw those 3 first-half interceptions, but they were able to prevail and win in the second half. They lost in overtime at Tennessee. They beat LSU last week, and then now they upset the apple cart by beating Ole Miss and give it up for their defense there. They got the big interception there late in the end zone, and then also another interception from Jackson Dart, who are, I'm sure, the Rebels, they got to be sick knowing that they had a great opportunity with all the other teams. Granted that this game was the 3:30 game, but knowing that the other teams fell apart, they certainly would have had themselves in good stead with the committee and with getting into the college football playoff. But now that goes up in smoke as they suffered their third loss. And then lastly was Texas A&M. Now, here's the thing about Texas A&M. Based on what had transpired, and with Georgia beating UMass there on Saturday, that propels Georgia to the championship game of the SEC. So now you're going to have a scenario this forthcoming weekend with it being rivalry weekend with the Ohio State Michigans and obviously Texas A&M, where the Longhorns will have to go to College Station. The winner of that game is going to go to play Georgia in the SEC Championship. So Texas A&M, although they suffered a 4 overtime loss to Auburn, but it's still right in front of them. They could still win against Texas and then have themselves a position at the table to go up against Georgia in a championship game that if they win that game, they will have an automatic bye, even as a team that has, get ready, 3 losses. So Texas A&M, the Aggies, they're counting their lucky stars and just being grateful and thankful that they have an opportunity to put themselves in a position to go out and play in the championship game and in the process have their destiny in their own hands, which is just mind-boggling to think. But this is what happened there on Saturday as all these teams fell by the wayside and put the Aggies in a position, even after that just heart-wrenching loss, 4 overtimes to Auburn, that they're still in a position to get themselves in the college football playoff. And then you have a couple of other teams that you could probably say bye-bye, although we have to wait and see, especially in the Big 12, when it comes to Colorado losing to Kansas. And Kansas, talk about a team that has played spoiler here. Kansas, who beat BYU last week, and we'll get to BYU in a second, and then beat Colorado there on Saturday, to where Dion in the postgame said, our team had read all the press clippings, as I mentioned earlier, and in essence, that's what it was, because this team, as he said, they got comfortable with success. They looked at what had transpired here over the last few weeks and getting a lot of traction throughout the country. Oh, look at Dion's team. Now they're ranked 16th in the country. If they win this game, and considering what happened there on Saturday with all the other teams, that they probably would have gotten closer. If not, maybe the committee would have pushed them into the top 12. Well, you can forget about that, as the Buffaloes, intoxicated by the success. That was the quote that Dion said. And I thought that hammered it home as far as what their team, I'm sure that they were getting their chests puffed out And to the point where, yes, they read the press clippings and knowing that they're on the come up and knowing that they were maybe this close to possibly getting themselves a position or a berth into the college football playoff, but you can forget about that as they suffered their third loss. And then Kansas, again, spoiling BYU the week before, and BYU losing to Arizona State. Now, I have to see what the Big 12 and how this is all going to unfold here, because you have Arizona State, you have BYU, but BYU, remember, they started 9-0, and now they've lost 2 in a row, to where they dropped completely out of the top 12, and now they're ranked at 20th at the moment. So, yes, they're going to need a lot of help, and this is where the college football season is certainly now rising to the top here. While I talked about a month ago that, these teams that are going to lose a game, maybe 2 games, they're going to make it to the college football playoff. It's a formality. It's a foregone conclusion. And I was dead wrong. And think about it. With just Texas A&M, 3-loss team. They win the next 2 games, they're going to be in the tournament. Where a lot of people thought that if you lose 3 games, that's an automatic, bye-bye, outside looking in. You are not going to be able to sniff a playoff unless you buy a ticket. So here we go into this weekend, which is going to be fascinating to say the least. And I'll go through the games in a second. But with BYU, they obviously did not play well. Arizona State led the entire game. And even though they came back, it was 21-0 and then 28-9 before BYU came within 5 points or within a score. But obviously were unable to get the go-ahead score. And Arizona State, they flood the field, the fans, faculty, etc. And now you have to wonder whether or not BYU had this big season. And who knows, stranger things have happened. And I'm certainly not going to sit here today and think that BYU is not going to make it, because I could see another rash of teams go by the wayside. And then next thing you know, BYU will be thrusted into the top 12 by the committee. And then I'm going to look like a fool. But what I can tell you as of right now is this. As I break it down, your recent poll, your top 5, Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, and Notre Dame after thrashing Army. So you can forget about Army even maybe sniffing a college football playoff. So those are your top 5 there. The next 5 are Georgia, Tennessee. And remember, Tennessee as well as SMU, because Tennessee 7th, Miami 8th, and SMU 9th. Both of those teams, by the committee, they were out of the playoff picture. So that just goes to show you how much difference a week makes when it comes to teams who, I'm sure at this time last week or last Tuesday, they were crying in their beers and wondering, oh geez, I don't know if we're going to be able to get back in the picture. And look at this, like I mentioned, what a difference a week makes. And then you have Indiana, like I mentioned, they dropped from 5 to 10. 11th and 12th goes to Boise State and Clemson, and Boise just eked out a win at Wyoming, which would have been just maybe even a death knell for Boise State, but they were able to survive. And then Clemson. Those are your top 12. The next few teams on the outside looking in are Alabama, which I don't think, even if they win at home against Auburn, which we would think they would do, they do not play well at Auburn. And even though last year, remember that 4th and 31, it was a 4th and goal to 31, and Jalen Milroe had that Hail Mary that was completed. But for Alabama, it's going to be a long shot. Arizona State, Ole Miss, South Carolina, those are the teams 12 to 16 that are bunched up and hoping to see if they could somehow get it through the back door after this past weekend. And when we break it all down, how I look at it will be your top 4, obviously going to be Oregon, Texas, Miami, Boise State as of right now. Now that could change. Who knows with those teams? They already had won their games over the weekend, so I don't think there's going to be much of a change there when it comes to the top 4. But right now, it looks like the 12 that are going to get in, what we see. Now, Clemson could be that one team. I would think that they're probably going to be there as far as the top 12. And if we're going to look at it just based on the rankings, you're going to have ND, Notre Dame that is, maybe Notre Dame Clemson, which they've, of course, butted heads in the past. Georgia, SMU, Tennessee, Miami. Those could be your other games. And then you'll have the, what is that? I got that wrong here. Georgia, Clemson, Tennessee, Boise, my apologies. Miami, Indiana, and SMU against SMU, Miami, and then Indiana, Tennessee. I got my just rankings all mixed up here. So we shall see what the committee's going to select. I don't think Alabama deserves to be there, even if they try to sneak them in through the back door. That was just a pathetic performance there on Saturday night. The committee has, I don't care. Alabama, yes, even without Nick Saban, they do not belong. Arizona State could have an argument based on what they did to BYU. And I don't know who you're going to take out. You're not going to take out Boise State if that's the case. Ole Miss suffering another loss. I get it that they're trying to knock on the door, but you can't bring them in. And even though South Carolina's played well, but I can't see them getting in. Your top 12 in some way, shape, or form, that is going to be what it is, at least from what I think and what I see here as far as what the selection committee will pick out here tomorrow night. And how I look at it on my YouTube channel, as I mentioned earlier, if not Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, I'll go through what the committee had seen and what they are going to currently rank the teams and what the matchups will be. Of course, that's going to change big time, as we know, between now and next week at this time. But let me take a look at the games this week, ones that'll be of note. As far as the 16 teams that are involved, Friday, Boise State will host Oregon State, high noon on Fox. Colorado will host Oklahoma State. Then you have, and even though Colorado, I think where are they ranked now? I think they're ranked maybe 19. They're not out of the top 25. I can take a peek at that in a minute. Mississippi State at Ole Miss. Again, this was a rivalry week. Those are your games on Friday. Georgia Tech at Georgia, 7:30 there on Friday night. And then Saturday, you have Michigan, Ohio State. No big whoop there. I don't even think Michigan could pull off an upset. If the game was at the Big House, maybe I would say so. But considering the success that Michigan has had over the years against Ohio State, and knowing that Ohio State, although this would be like taking candy away from a baby, but I'm sure they're going to try to run up the score and just put Michigan out of their misery, considering that they've done so to Ohio State over the years and beating them the last 3 years, but of course under Coach Jim Harbaugh. Then you have Tennessee at Vandy, South Carolina, Clemson, a big game there. You'll also have, that's in the 12 o'clock window on Saturday. Then as you move it along, Notre Dame, USC, can the Trojans, and usually historically that's a game where USC rises up and matches wits and talent. Maybe they're not as talented, but they certainly show a lot of heart and a lot of toughness. Let's see if the Trojans could do so there. Early, 3:30, not a night game out in Southern California. So just keep that in mind as Notre Dame tries to keep themselves there and amongst the top 5 in the nation. Auburn at Alabama, like I mentioned. Miami at Syracuse, California, SMU. Obviously, you have a ton of games here. And then your night game there of note is Texas and Texas A&M, which obviously is an enormous game for the Aggies, even for Texas for that matter. But that's what you have there as far as the college football landscape, not only this past week, but leading into this week. And again, no podcast on Thursday because of the holiday. So I will recap it all next Monday. And one more time, certainly stay tuned for my YouTube channel analysis for shorts, my 30-second or 1-minute shorts, to see if any developments arise, which they will when it comes to college football. Now, let me keep the helmet and shoulder pads on as I go through the National Football League. And yesterday, it was a so-so Sunday. I know you've had some interesting developments there where Kansas City had to eke out another win by the skin of their teeth at Carolina, as Carolina made it interesting. They were down 27-19, where Bryce Young actually had a pretty good game. And what's even more puzzling is the Chief defense. Chief defense is known to be stout, is known to be even, you could even argue as of right now, maybe the better unit than their offense. And even though the offense could still put up points, and of course they got the game-winning field goal there late. No Harrison Butker as he's on IR, but it doesn't matter. You can put me in as kicker, and I will kick the game-winning field goal. But the Chiefs, even Patrick Mahomes in the postgame, he came out and said, yeah, we got to start burying these people. We cannot have these tightrope, close games to where we're living on the edge week in and week out, because it's going to come back to bite them. And just think about it. The Monday night game against Tampa, they barely got out alive against Denver. We saw what happened last week against Buffalo as they finally lost. And then here, the Panthers gave them all of what they could muster and almost came away, at least going into overtime, against the two-time defending champs. So if you're a Chief fan, short week, you host the Raiders, and I'm sure you want to give them a little payback, considering last year on Christmas, they went into your building and with only one pass completed for the last 3 quarters and a couple of turnovers returned for touchdowns, the Raiders went into Arrowhead and won. So I don't know if they have long memories to think about that. I get it, that was last year. I get it, you're not going to try to translate that to this year, but considering that they have an opponent coming in the Raiders who have lost 7 in a row, and they're a team that is out to sea already for the 2024 season. I wouldn't be surprised if they put up a big number against the Raiders and just go running into the night and get the leftover turkey and maybe whatever shopping that you're going to get out of that when you tune into the game on Amazon Prime there Friday, that by the time you get to the second quarter, it's 21-3 Chiefs. So we'll see what happens there. Then you also had last night, Saquon Barkley with a massive performance, 255 yards on the ground, over 300 from the line of scrimmage, and the MVP chance raining down from the Philly faithful who made the trek out to SoFi in a 37-20 victory. And Saquon has had a marvelous year. To where does he deserve to be in the MVP running? He does, but we know with running backs, it's very hard. Unless you're Terrell Davis, when he rushed for over 2,000 yards in 98. The last running back to do so was Adrian Peterson, who in his own right rushed for 2,000 yards as a member of the Minnesota Vikings. And running backs, you have to have a monster and really special year in order to win an MVP. And even though Josh Allen, in my eyes, is the front runner to win the award, as we're 11 games into the season, going on 12. But how I look at it is, it's Josh Allen's award to lose unless Saquon is going to continue at this clip. And the Eagles, now that they won 7 in a row, and you could put the NFC East to bed as they now have a 2.5 game lead over the Commanders, and I'm going to get to them in a second, where the Eagles flying high and their schedule still a little bit tricky, where they have to go to Washington, and I get it, that's probably more on Washington than it is Philly. Pittsburgh comes into their building, and of course I'll get to the Steelers in a little while. But the Eagles, they got not really a tricky schedule, but they do have a couple of games on the docket that could be a bit of a challenge. And even though going to Washington won't be tricky, I'm sure a lot of the Eagle fans will flock down to the nation's capital to root their team on the victory. And with the Steelers coming into Philadelphia, the Steelers have never won in Philadelphia as a franchise. Yes, you heard that right. The Steelers, I believe, are 0-8 or 0-9 lifetime in Philadelphia. So whether it was in the old vet or even here in the Link or in stadiums previous to that, they have not won in the city of brotherly love. So just keep that in mind as we move it forward. And for the Eagles, they're playing as good as anybody right now. Even as good as the Lions, who beat the Colts 24-6. No big deal there. No shock as the Lions continue to roar. And right now, if you ask me, they're the best team in the sport. They're better than the Chiefs. The Chiefs, like I said, teetering on the brink at times here, where the Lions have just been blowing people out and just been dominating here. And think about this. Even with the 7-game winning streak by the Eagles, now the Lions have won 9 straight. Because remember, they lost in week 2 to Tampa, and since then they haven't lost. So we could talk about the Chiefs 10-1 and just getting their unbeaten streak snapped last week. And we could talk about the Eagles and Saquon and what they've done, but you can't forget the Lions. And yes, you could say they beat up on the bad teams, blowing out Jacksonville last week and Dallas earlier this year. And then now, all right, the Colts, even though they're kind of in the hunt on the fringe in the AFC, nonsense. Lions are still, to me, I think, not only the team to beat in the NFC, but maybe the best team. Not maybe, they are the best team in the NFL, but it's only late November. The best team, as we all understand, is going to be crowned Super Bowl Sunday there, the second Sunday of February. So those are the things that, like I said, that made it so-so, but now the bigger thing are the Commanders. And you have to wonder, are they starting to lose some steam here? Is the air being let out of the balloon? Are the Commanders a team? I'm not going to say they're a fake team. I won't go as far as saying that right now. But you have to wonder, with a quarterback that, I'm not going to say has hit a wall, but you wonder if the rigors of the NFL season are now starting to catch up to a one Jaden Daniels. And for Dan Quinn, for everything that has been talked about over the first 9 games of the year, remember, they started off 7-2. And now they're 7-5, and they still have their bye forthcoming, which I know that they're going to be jumping for joy and cannot wait. And let me even look to see when that bye is, which I still don't think it's not for another week or two. Because I believe this coming week there are no byes because of the holiday schedule. And let me take a quick peek at that now. You have everybody in action. So no teams having the bye. And let me see, for week 14 at early December, the Commanders, yes, that's when their bye is. So they'll have a game this weekend, and then they'll have their bye, which I'm sure they are welcoming with open arms and are counting the days until they get that bye. And I'm sure for them it would have been needed more so this weekend than ever, because even after losing to Philly 10 days ago, but to have Dallas come into their building, and Dallas, as we all know, walking wounded, no Dak Prescott, no DeMarcus Lawrence. I know Micah Parsons was back, had a sack there in the game yesterday, and we know that their offense has just been CeeDee Lamb and a bunch of ragamuffins. But for the Cowboys, good job by them to get a win in Washington. But how I look at it was, this was a brutal loss, because although they trailed for most of the game, the Commanders, but they had just a almost miracle of the gods when they were down 27-20, and this is after giving up a kickoff return to the Cowboys there when they cut the deficit, and for them to bounce back from that, down 27-20 with seconds remaining, and with no timeouts, to have Jaden Daniels complete a pass to the sideline to Terry McLaurin, and for him to weave his way through traffic, through the secondary, and then back up the sideline to where they got into the end zone with about 20 seconds to go to make it 27-20 to 27-26. And you're going to think to yourself, wait a minute, there is no way that the Commanders, after the Hail Mary earlier this year against Chicago, for them to now add this to their miracle season, despite the fact that they lost the last two games to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, how they could get themselves back in the win column to keep themselves, at the time you didn't know, but paced with the Eagles in the NFC East. And then as they go out to kick the extra point to tie the game, what happens? Bad snap, goes wide left, and the Commanders lose a brutal game. So even when they got the setup for the onside kick, it was returned right into the hands of the up man, and I forgot who it was off the top of my head, but he ran it 43 yards into the end zone, 34-26, and that's your ball game. And that's why, if you're a Commander fan, you have to be a little concerned here, because you've come back to the pack, and even though when it's all said and done, I think you're going to make the playoffs, and even if we look at their schedule, it is not bad. Yes, they got to go to Dallas and host Philadelphia later on in the year, but they do have the Titans forthcoming in their building. They have the bye, and then they go to New Orleans, which could be a tricky game. Wait and see. Then they have Eagles, Falcons at home, and the Falcons are up and down, and then at Dallas, the final game of the season. So they're going to have to navigate a somewhat tricky schedule, and although the Commanders have played well, and surprisingly this year, but they're not automatics. So this 7-2 start could end up being 9-8, and even if you are 9-8 in the NFC, I think you're going to get in, and I would think it'd be a shoo-in, but we've seen seasons go up in smoke to where they conclude a 7-2 start with 7 straight losses, or losing 7 of the last 8, to where they're on the outside looking in with a lot of questions that need to be answered going into a long off season. Not trying to put any hex or any jinx on the team, but this is where you have to wonder. And okay, they do have Tennessee coming in, and Tennessee's actually played a little bit better considering they won in Houston yesterday. And the Texans, that's another team you got to scratch your head, because that's a game that they should have won in their building. No ifs, ands, buts, babies about it. But with the Colts losing, and they still have a 2-game lead, and the tiebreaker against the Colts, really it's a 3-game lead, they're going to be fine. But you have to wonder if the Texans are going to have any length in the playoffs. They're going to host a home game. You would think, all right, they may win that game, but a lot of people thought that they could go to an AFC Championship game this year. But right now, it looks like they could be either onto a divisional round and lose, or maybe, depending on the opponent, could be one and done. So that, obviously, we're not going to know until we get to the middle of January. But for the Commanders, I'd be concerned. I really would. And let's see if they could get back on the beam against the Titan team this coming weekend. But as far as the other games on the docket here over the weekend, and one more time, you don't really have a lot to really hang your hat on. Denver winning in Vegas. We talked about Vegas and how they're in just a tailspin themselves, losing 7 in a row, and the Broncos now 7-5, putting themselves in good position there in the AFC to qualify for a postseason bid. Even the Miami Dolphins, and I get it, they're 2 games back. They beat up on New England, no big whoop there, but now they're 5-6, and there's a little bit of respectability going on when you get to the games there on Thanksgiving night, because Miami's going to Green Bay, and I'll get to the Packers next. Miami's going to Green Bay, which at least makes the game watchable. Because if they would have lost to New England, there would have been pretty much, this feeling of the Dolphins lost to New England. They would have been, at that point, 4-7, no shot of making the playoffs. But now they're 5-6, a little respectable, playing better. They could only hope for a weird 50-degree night, because if it's going to be anything below 40 for a team that plays and trains in South Florida to have to go to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and play a night game where it's going to be probably in the 30s, maybe a wind chill in the 20s, and who knows if snow's in the forecast. So the Dolphins, they're going to have to do their best to try to get out of Green Bay with a victory and to get to 500 and to be part of this AFC playoff mix. But at least it's a game we could possibly watch, because the games on Thanksgiving are putrid. And I'll talk about the schedule in a minute. Speaking of putrid, the Niners. And who knows what's going to be left of this team by the time we get to the end of the year, because they had no Nick Bosa out with an injury, no Brock Purdy out with shoulder soreness, for Brandon Allen is your quarterback. And what happened? They go to Green Bay and they got flat out embarrassed. 38-10, Jordan Love throwing touchdowns all over the lot. Josh Jacobs throwing a hat trick, counting his touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, well over 100 yards rushing. And the Niners had 0 answers. And this is a team going back to training camp where they didn't have Brandon Ayuk throughout the whole training camp, and then he got his money only to have his ACL torn about, 6-7 games into the season. Trent Williams, a guy that's been in and out of the lineup and also waited till the last week of training camp before he got paid. Christian McCaffrey, who's just recently come back into the fold as far as their offense goes, and he's been, let's face it, a non-factor. George Kittle in and out of the lineup, Deebo Samuel in and out of the lineup, and you have a team that has literally been a mash unit. Now they're a game under 500, a game that we all thought that was going to be tough for them to win, considering that this little 2-game road trip that they're on, going to Green Bay. And oh, by the way, who are they going to play next week? In Buffalo, I believe that's a Sunday night game, to see whether or not that they can draw themselves back to 500, whether or not Brock Purdy's going to come back into the lineup, because they're going to desperately need him. Not that I'm trying to make him out to be Joe Montana, but right now, the Niners are looking on the brink to maybe not even making it to the playoffs, because we talked about last week how they were, 10th in the NFC, and now I would think they're probably even below that, if not at 10, when it comes to the top teams that are in the NFC that are going to qualify for the playoffs. And let me just pull this up real quick. Right now, San Francisco is 11th, and they're behind the Rams, because the Rams had the tiebreaker then. We know about the Rams losing last night. But San Francisco, they are right now looking, I hate to use this term, but they're looking at the barrel of a shotgun. And if they don't get matters fixed right away, and the schedule isn't even any easier after that, because not only that they got to go to Buffalo this coming Sunday, but they have a short week to where they host the Rams on a Thursday night, so a quick turnaround there. Or in fact, my apologies, they'll host the Bears, then they'll host the Rams. So they do have a bit of a break there. But then their final few games at Miami, which Miami plays better at home to Detroit, and then at Arizona. Before I segue to the Cardinals and who's at the top of the NFC West as of right now, which is just mind-boggling to think. But the Niners have a tough schedule. And I have to say, as of right this moment, they're not going to make the playoffs. And that's not going on a limb because they're 11th in the conference. And that's not any type of big declaration like, whoa, Jay Reels, he's going to predict that. This is a team that has a very tricky schedule, that has not played well, and a lot of it is because they have not been healthy. But in what way, shape, or form are they going to turn this season around? Jerry Rice isn't walking through that door. Charles Haley isn't walking through that door. Ronnie Lott's not walking through that door. And for damn sure, Joe Montana is not going to head into that facility and save the day. So right now, if you're a Niner fan, I know you got to be stewing. I know you got to be just upset. And granted, yes, the pile of injuries just decimated your roster and decimated your season. But it looks like you're not going to qualify for the playoffs, and will certainly be a long year for Kyle Shanahan. Now, the NFC West, as we went into this weekend where Arizona was by their lonesome, where all the other teams beneath them were at 500, 5-5, and the Cardinals were 6-4. Arizona, Seattle yesterday, where they visited the Pacific Northwest. And what happened? The Cardinals, in a low-scoring game, up 7-3 as the Cardinals are trying to get in deep into Arizona territory, and on a 4th and 1 there midway through the third quarter, where I don't know what Kyler Murray was doing. He rolled out right, and it looked like he had to play short, but then had felt the rush, and he just threw the ball away, picked off, and it was run back to the house by Kobe Bryant with a C. No, not that Kobe Bryant, of course. Dearly departed, may he rest in peace. Kobe Bryant, pick 6 to the house, 13-3, and that was pretty much the biggest play of the game. They win 16-6, and now Arizona, by tiebreaker, head-to-head against the Seattle Seahawks, against the Arizona Diamondbacks, Arizona Cardinals, my apologies there. Seattle is now, although tied for first place, but they have the advantage with the tiebreaker of holding the fort there as a team. If the season was over, they would host a playoff game. Who would have thought that? 2 weeks ago, they were 4-5. They had to go into San Francisco and win a game that was a shock to everybody because San Francisco owns Seattle. They win that game, and now they beat the Cardinals to where their season is turned around. And the sad part is, now that they're in first place, watch them go into the next week, and we'll go through the schedule, and they will spit the bit and come back down to earth. That's how crazy the NFC West is. And if I could tell you right now who's going to come out alive, it's probably right now going to be Seattle, Arizona. It's not going to be the Niners. They're currently 1-3 in the division against these teams. So they've already lost to the Rams. They've already lost to Arizona. They've already lost to Seattle. The only win was against Seattle as they're done with their season series. So they would have to win those 2 games left in the division in order for them to have any shot. But if they lose at Buffalo and continue to flounder here and lose at home later against Detroit, it's not going to matter. That's why I don't think the Niners are going to make the playoffs. So when it comes to the NFC West, it is a jump ball. And right now, it's looking like Seattle has the upper hand, but we know there's still plenty of games to be played and plenty of time left. And Arizona will host Seattle, I believe, in that final week of the season. No, I have that wrong. That is not the case. They will not host that final game. I believe San Francisco will go to Arizona for the final game, but we know that they're going to play one another one more time before it is all said and done. But yeah, just a crazy NFC West there, and how that's going to shake down, your guess is as good as mine. But the other games of yesterday, Minnesota beat Chicago in overtime, and give it up. Chicago was valiant. They came back. Caleb Williams had a very good game. Same for Sam Darnold. But they had a field goal blocked, and I know Cairo Santos, the kicker, said that the game falls on him. Can't say that on a blocked field goal there in the second quarter, but they've had some tough sledding. The week before, remember, they had that one field goal as they had a chance to win. I forgot how they played off the top of my head. Was it Green Bay? Yes, it was against Green Bay. 21-19, they had a chance to win the game, and sure enough, they lost that game. Another division game in their building, they lose. Minnesota 9-2, and I know that I haven't given a lot of shine to the Vikings. 9-2, give it up. They've done very well here. Great job by the head coach, Kevin O'Connell. And let's see. We've seen this before with a Viking team 2 years ago where they were 13-4, and they were a team that certainly was hosting a home game. Remember, they lost to the Giants, and Daniel Jones suffered a bad defeat in their building. Is that going to be the same trajectory with a different quarterback? Who knows? But you got to give it up to what the Vikings have done here. Sneakily 9-2, and even though they lost to the Lions early on this year in the head-to-head, but they certainly have a shot to even overtake the Lions in the division. But of course, they must win that game against Detroit later this year. But with the other games of note, Tampa beating the Giants. Now, Tampa, they're a game behind the Falcons. Now, granted, the Falcons have swept Tampa, so in essence, they're 2 games. So they're going to have to overtake the Falcons in the division. And remember, the Falcons just had a bye. But they beat up on the Giants. Baker Mayfield mimicking Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito had, 30 yards in the first half. The Giant players, to a man, just blasting one another in the post-game, saying that I don't think we were inspired to play. Nobody showed up. And this is the players coming out. Not one source or one player suggested. No, multiple players have come out and targeted the whole team. And this is after Daniel Jones was let go. I talked about it on Thursday. He had a $23 million guarantee injury that if he got injured between now and the end of the year, that would go to next year's salary cap, which, if you recall, that's why the Broncos cut Russell Wilson last year in those final 2 games because he had a $37 million guarantee. So they said, we're not going to risk that. Daniel Jones, that was just a tough press conference that he had there. Very emotional, knowing what he gave to the team. And it wasn't all his fault. But for a guy who was picked 6th overall, 2018, had his moments, the aforementioned playoff game against the Vikings, but still wasn't going to be the guy, not your franchise quarterback or face of the franchise, and therefore he's going to probably latch on to another team. He has not been picked up as of yet, so we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen there. But the Giants, forget about it, 2-9, similar to the Jets at 3-8. 2 New York teams, as I talked about there on Thursday's podcast, and the Jets, hey, they didn't lose this weekend, but they didn't win because they had a bye as well. But that is pretty much your slate there. What else can I tell you? Tonight, Baltimore, Los Angeles, a big game there. Ravens, let's see if they could bounce back from the loss in Pittsburgh there last Sunday. And the Chargers, to me, it is a big game for them. Let me see them try to thwart that Raven offense and go up against a big opponent. We know that the Chargers have the talent and the head coaching experience. Of course, another Harbaugh bow here between Jim and John. But to me, this is one of the Chargers. I'm going to keep a close eye to see what they do. If they win the game, kudos to them. If they lose a tough, close game, all right, you're not going to like that because it's in your building. You want to see them win. And if for whatever the reason, the Ravens rush for 250 yards and Lamar goes off and they win 31-13, I don't want to hear from the Chargers the rest of the year. So that's what you have there. And then lastly with the Steelers, that was just a brutal game no matter how you slice it. And it came down to a couple of plays when they were down 18-6 in the game. And yes, I could talk about plays earlier, but the Steelers came roaring back. They tied the game there on a touchdown to Calvin Austin. And then as they got the fumble there, the strip sack by Nate Herbig deep in Brown territory, they were able to punch it in on a touchdown run by Jalen Warren to make it 19-18. And you thought to yourself, wow, Steelers came all the way back in the snow. Just a beautiful optic to watch a football game. And then this is the first of 2 inexplicable decisions by the head coach. And I understand that it probably came from Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, but what were they doing? Going for a 2-point conversion to where they had Justin Fields rush a 30-yard run up the right sideline at the start of the first drive to where they had the touchdown pass to Calvin Austin. Why did they bring him in for a short play 2-point conversion where they were going to use him as a decoy or what have you? But they decided to throw a fade in the corner to Cordarrelle Patterson? What? In the snow, in the elements, a fade? Terrible play call there. And then as the Steelers, with the Browns marching down the field, 4 minutes to go, Jameis Winston, typical Winston fashion, although he had a good game, but throws an interception. Back-to-back possessions, fumble, interception, and you're thinking, all right, all the Steelers need is a first down or 2, ice the game, you get out of Dodge, you stole this game. 3rd and 4, Justin Fields is in. All right, let's see what's going to happen. At around the Steeler 36-yard line. What happens? They go for a bomb down the left sideline to George Pickens. Whether he was interfered or not, it was bang, bang. You probably could have thrown a flag there, but it wasn't completely obvious. And in that regard, I can understand why they didn't throw the flag. But what are you doing throwing a long bomb, low percentage pass down the sideline? Made no sense. So therefore, the Steelers had the punt. What happens? They march down the field, punch it in the end zone, Nick Chubb. I get it that the Steelers had a last-ditch effort with no timeouts and trying to hurl a touchdown pass into the end zone. Hail Mary was not answered. Steelers lose 8-3. And I knew that they were going to lose against the Browns. It was, to me, after that emotional win against the Ravens on Sunday in a short week, there was no way. I know George Pickens, Browns are a bad team. We lost it in the snow. The elements were the problem. No. No excuse. You could have stole the game, could have won the game, and maybe even should have won the game after the interception where all you needed was a first down. But those 2 terrible play calls, I thought sealed their fate. And the Steelers are 8-3. So now let's see if the Chargers can do the Steelers fan a favor, keep that 1.5 game lead as opposed to them being at 8-4, just a half game behind, although we do have the tiebreaker understood. And as far as your schedule this week, Thanksgiving, the 3 games, Chicago at Detroit. All right, Chicago maybe indoors, but we would think Detroit, they're going to be flying high. A Thanksgiving game in their building where the team is actually good and even better than last year. So you know that the Lion faithful, they're going to flock to Ford Field before all of the dinner celebration and the give thanks, etc. is going to take place. So the Thanksgiving Day tradition, the head out there, to me, that's going to be all about Detroit. And it's good to see because Detroit, as we all know, that first game has been a dud for so many years. The Lions have never been good. And now at least we have a game where the Lions, who knows, they could go away winning, or who knows if Chicago's going to be game to keep it competitive in the fourth quarter, which I hope we would see to get a good start to the Thanksgiving Day festivities. The second game, you can forget about it. Giants at Dallas. Oh my God. Just take those 3 hours off, celebrate it with your family, maybe have it on in the background, but Tommy DeVito versus Cooper Rush, no thanks. I would think the Cowboys will go away winning, and who knows, maybe some DeVito magic, maybe. I don't want to put it all on him, but that's a game I could certainly pass up on. And then, of course, Miami-Green Bay, as we talked about there, is your nightcap. And as far as Sunday goes, of course, you have the Black Friday game, which I did mention, Vegas at Kansas City, which I'm sure the Chiefs are going to be chomping at the bit to bounce back off of these just winning or losing by the hairs of their chinny chin chin type games. So we'll see what's going to happen there after some leftover Thanksgiving food as well as some Black Friday shopping, whether you go out or online. You'll have at it there on Amazon. So yeah, you go shopping on Amazon and watch the game simultaneously. Sunday games, Chargers at Atlanta. This is your 1 o'clock window. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Arizona, Minnesota. Not a bad game there. Indy, New England, Seahawks at Jets, Tennessee at Washington, Houston at Jacksonville. Chargers, Atlanta, not a bad game. Pittsburgh, Cincy, Bengals last hope. Arizona, Minnesota, not bad. See if Arizona can bounce back. Forget about Indy, New England. Seattle, New York, I get it to Seattle. And then you have Tennessee, Washington, only for the Commanders' sake. Houston, Jacksonville, forget about. Then your 4 o'clock window, Rams at New Orleans, Tampa, Carolina, Philly at Baltimore. That's your 4 o'clock game right there. San Francisco, Buffalo, do or die for the Niners. I do like Philly at Baltimore. Very good game there. And let's see if Philly can continue their winning streak. And if Baltimore loses in San Diego, in LA, that's going to be an Armageddon game for them. And then your Monday night game is, and they couldn't flex out of this, people, so Cleveland at Denver. Ugh. No thanks for yours truly. That's what you have at the NFL. Let me see if there's anything else to discuss there when it comes to the National Football League. No, absolutely not. So now, these last two things are going to be quick. Really three when we talk about the baseball. So as I ditch the helmeted shoulder pads and get to the association, lace up the high tops, the only really big-time news from the week was Lucas straining his wrist out for a week. They lost in Miami last night in overtime to the Heat. I know watching the highlight there of Jimmy Butler got a big dunk there to put the game and put it into overtime as I pull up my NBA standings, etc. But for the association, quiet weekend. I know the Sixers are floundering. Boo birds from the top of the Wells Fargo Center as they lost to the Clippers last night, 125-99. Paul George is out, tweaked the knee. Same for Embiid. Tyrese Maxey, I don't know if he even came back yet. But as we all know, the Sixers, they're in a quagmire. And I don't know if there's going to be enough time for them to get out of that. We'll have to wait and see. They're 10 games under at 3-13. The Bucks, on the other hand, they have righted the ship to where they've won 4 in a row. Remember, they had just a sluggish start for them. They were 1-6, and now they're 8-9. So they've at least won 7 in the last 10. Maybe now they're trending upward. So let's see what the Bucks are going to be able to do here as we get into the month of December. Then you have other teams there in the East that have played well. We know about Cleveland. They bounced back after losing to the Celtics. They've won 2 in a row. So kudos to them. And then you also have a scenario where the Celtics, who they've won 5 in a row, trying to nip at the heels of the Cavaliers. So we'll certainly keep our eyes on that. Magic have played well as the 3rd seed in the East. Then you have Golden State, who just lost the other day to San Antonio in a big performance there by Victor Wembanyama. And the Spurs, you got to give it up for them. The Spurs are a team that right now, I get it. You can say, well, Jay Reels, no big whoop. They're 10th in the standings currently. And with still not even a quarter into the season, I think if you're an NBA fan, you want to see the Spurs get to the postseason because you want to see what Victor Wembanyama is going to do in a postseason setting. And I get it, 7-10, it's not a best-of-7 series, but it's the start of something. And even though there's still plenty of season to go, if they could somehow even crack the top 6 or even get like 5 and 6, that will guarantee them a first-round playoff series. That would even be better. But I think for right now, you would be apt to look at the Spurs to be anywhere in that 7-10 bracket. You would like to see them maybe at least get to 8 because if they lose that first game, then you know that they'll have another game to fall back on. So just keep that in mind. Keep that receipt there as we move it along. But the Spurs have played pretty well now that they've won 3 straight and have put themselves in the 10th seed. Teams that have been disappointing, I know with the Celtics winning yesterday in Boston against the Timberwolves, and the T-Wolves right now are 8-8. You wonder if the disruption of the team with the trade, Karl-Anthony Towns, does that have something to do with what the Timberwolves have gotten off to a slow start for them, being at 500? And remember, T-Wolves were up amongst the top 2 teams in the conference last year throughout the entire season, so you have to wonder what's going on with them. I know the Rockets have played pretty well as their 3 seed in the conference. I know Golden State has been a bit of a surprise considering with Klay Thompson now and with the influx of the young players on their team to try to make a contribution to the veterans a la Stephen, Draymond. But NBA with plenty of games to go, and again, not even 25% of the season, we'll keep an eye out on what's going to take place here. And let's look at the schedule here forthcoming. We know no games on Thanksgiving. That's a given. Same for the NHL, which I'll get to in a second. But as far as the NBA goes, here's what you have. And I'm just going to go through key games here. I'm not going to go through a laundry list. Clippers in Boston tonight. So let's see what's going to happen here as the Clippers now move up the northeastern corridor from Philly to Beantown. New York and Denver tonight. The Knicks, that is. Brooklyn at Golden State. Just for grins and giggles. OKC at Sacramento. Milwaukee at Miami tomorrow. LA at Phoenix. The Lakers, that is. Those are your 2 TNT games. Your ESPN games for Wednesday. New York at Dallas. 7:30, followed by OKC at Golden State. So keep that in mind. Houston at Philadelphia, only because they're in this part, not really in my neck of the woods, but here in the Northeast. Other than that, nothing else to really discuss. Clippers in Washington, again, being part of the Northeastern Corridor. Sacramento, Minnesota. LA at San Antonio, that's the Lakers on Wednesday. Then as we head into the weekend, you have LA at Minnesota, Clippers, that is. OKC at the Lakers on Friday. That's your ESPN game late. LA at Minnesota is your early game, ESPN. Saturday, not much to discuss there. Golden State at Phoenix, if you want to look at that on a Saturday night with nothing else to watch, especially if you're done with college football. And then next Sunday, you have a slate of games where Boston at Cleveland. Keep that in mind as we'll talk about that next Monday. So let's see if the Cavaliers can exact some revenge against the Celtics after losing to them last Tuesday. And then that's pretty much it. OKC at Houston. That's a good game there next Sunday. Lakers at Utah. San Antonio, Sacramento. Denver at the Clippers. So you got some games to sink your teeth into if you're an NBA fan as we head into the holiday week. And as far as the National Hockey League goes, you had some terrible news there. We talked about Alex Ovechkin scoring the 2 goals in Utah where he suffered a leg injury due to a collision that he had, and the prognosis not good. Fractured fibula, out for 4 to 6 weeks. So his pursuit on the all-time goal-scoring record, Wayne Gretzky 894, is going to have to be put on ice here, no pun intended. And he was on track to break that sometime in February. I don't know if that was the middle of February, early or late, but let's say 4 weeks. Now you're pushing that to the end of March. And if it's 6 weeks, if he does come back in that time, you're pushing it to the end of the season, which the end of the regular season is in mid-April. So with Ovechkin, we can only hope that he comes back sooner than later. Maybe it is closer to 4 weeks as opposed to 6. So you know that once he returns, I'll keep you guys and gals appraised. Excuse me, no, wait, I take that back. Apprised, not appraised. Drop the A there, J-Reels. Upon his return or his prognosis, if he comes back early, late, or who knows, any complications with the leg, that we'll have to wait and see. But all eyes will be on Ovechkin upon his return to see if he can pick up from where he left off to continue that assault on Gretzky's record, all-time 894, as he's currently, 27 behind or 27 breaking it. So right now he is at, if I do my math correctly, 668. 27 is 695. So that's what you have with Ovechkin. And his counterpart, longtime counterpart and nemesis, if you want to say that, Sidney Crosby, recently notched his 600th career goal, the 21st player in National Hockey League history to do so. He did it just a couple of nights ago against the, funny enough, the aforementioned Utah Hockey Club in a loss Felt good about it, didn't feel good about the loss, something he'll reflect on after his career, but 600 to be a part of that pantheon with all the greats, whether it's Gretzky, even his counterpart Ovechkin, Phil Esposito, Mark Messier, Steve Yzerman, Brett Hull, Marcel Dion. Did I say Phil Esposito? Go on down the list. We know who the top goal scorers are in the sport. When it comes to that, Brendan Shanahan, I believe, is over 600. Steve Yzerman, if I didn't mention him. Mario Lemieux, how could I forget? So, kudos, congratulations to Crosby. As we all know, he is going into the Hall of Fame, obviously on ice skates, the all-time great that he is. And then a weird one here, where the St. Louis Blues, who are actually in town, Saturday night they lose to the Islanders, 3-1, and the Islanders, as we all know, they've been flailing away. But the head coach, Drew Bannister, didn't last throughout this trip, where the Blues will play the Rangers tonight before going to New Jersey to play the Devils on Wednesday. Well, Drew Bannister didn't even make it to the second leg of this trip, and I'm sure right now he's already on a plane, who knows where, because he's been jettisoned as head coach of the Blues. And guess who parachutes in? A guy who was just fired last week by the Boston Bruins after their just bad start for them as the Bruins underachieved. Jim Montgomery, who got his walking papers there by the Bruins. Well, guess what? One man's trash is another man's treasure, as the Blues have now hired Montgomery as the head coach. So guess what? He comes in. I'm sure he'll have a press conference today, and he'll get to feel the holiday spirit here locally, as the tree is not up yet. But you'll get the gist of all of the window dressing and what's going to happen, although they're going to leave before Thanksgiving. But for Montgomery, he gets a trip to New York as his ushering a new coaching regime for the Blues as they try to get their season on track. So that's what you have there with the recent NHL news and notes. And as far as the overall standings and what's happening there, I know the Panthers have hit a little bit of a skid. They've lost 3 in a row and have not played well. The Sabres nipping on their heels and giving up for Buffalo. They played well, winners of 3 in a row as they try to make it to the playoffs for the first time in forever. Now, not as long as the Jets, because I believe out of the 4 teams or the 4 leagues, the Jets are the one team that has the longest drought when it comes to not making it into the playoffs. But I believe the Sabres are next on that list, and they're doing whatever it takes to try to get themselves into the playoffs. And with the NHL now, for most teams, as I'm looking at here, 21, 21, 22, Tampa at 19. You got some teams at 19, but we're just about the quarter pole of the NHL season. So Florida's struggling a little bit. Toronto in first place. They've won 4 in a row. And who knows when Austin Matthews is going to return. We're still waiting to see what's going to happen with him, as he's been out with an upper body injury. Let me see. No, nothing yet there with Matthews. Nope, not returned as of yet, as based on what I could tell. Then you have the Jersey Devils, who have played the most games in the sport, 23. They're a point ahead of Carolina, and I believe they played this week. I'll look at the schedule in a minute. Followed by the Capitals with no Ovechkin, as we know. Rangers, losers of 2 straight, but they have a lot of games in hand with the Devils and with a lot of other teams in the division. Islanders are right behind them, but 2 games in hand with the Islanders as they're 8-5. And when we look at the Western Conference, we talked about how the Jets now have lost 3 of the last 4. So after going 8-0, 15-1, the best start ever in the history of the sport, now they have lost 2 of their last, or I should say, what are they, 2-3, and lost 3 of the last 5. So come back down to earth a little bit there with the Wild nipping on their heels. Stars trying to find their groove as they won 2 in a row. And out west, Vegas, Calgary, even LA, bunched up there, separated by 3 points. You want to throw in Edmonton as well, Vancouver. A lot of those teams, 5 points behind one another out of those top 5 teams out west. And your schedule this week, no games on Thanksgiving, but we know there's going to be a plethora of post-Thanksgiving afternoon games. Usually you got that one game in Philadelphia or in Boston, which is always that 1 o'clock game. It's usually Rangers at Philadelphia, Rangers at Boston. I'll take a look right now. Tonight you have Utah, Toronto. Games of note here I want to discuss. Washington at Florida tonight as well. Colorado at Tampa. As a matter of fact, Utah, Toronto was last night. My apologies there. So, and that was Toronto winning. I believe they shut out the Utah Hockey Club there. No, they didn't. It was 3-2. My apologies. My eyes are deceiving me. Hey, let me put on my glasses. Yes, I have glasses, people, which I just got on Friday. So let me throw those for those who are watching on YouTube or even Spotify for that matter, because you can get the video on Spotify too. Washington at Florida, Nashville at New Jersey tonight. St. Louis is at New York, as we know, the Rangers, and they'll play the Devils on Wednesday. Vegas at Philly. Dallas at Carolina, good game there. Winnipeg at Minnesota, interesting matchup there for you. So you had a ton of good games there tonight in the National Hockey League. Vancouver at Boston tomorrow. Wednesday, Minnesota at Buffalo, good game there. Rangers at Carolina for the top spot in the Metropolitan. Washington at Tampa. Toronto at Florida. Bruins at the Islanders, if you want to throw that in there. Vancouver at Pittsburgh. A lot of good games this week. Vegas at Colorado, Winnipeg at LA. Then you go into Friday, New York at Philadelphia. There's your 1 o'clock game. Then you have a ton of afternoon games. Chicago, Minnesota, Vancouver at Buffalo, Jersey, Detroit, New York, Washington, Florida at Carolina, another 3 o'clock game. Tampa, Nashville, 3 o'clock on Friday. Then you have Pittsburgh at Boston. That's a TNT 6:30 game. And then your 9 o'clock is Colorado at Dallas. A lot of good games this week. Saturday, Carolina at Florida, Toronto, Tampa, Washington at the Devils, Calgary at Pittsburgh, Nashville, Minnesota. What's Nashville done? I know they've had a slow start. I don't know if they've righted the ship to the point where they're actually playing a little bit better. I picked them as an over this year, as you guys and gals know if you follow the podcast. I'll get to that in a minute. Sunday schedule, Montreal, Boston, an old-time rival. Winnipeg at Dallas. A lot of good games in the AHL. So at least you have that to look forward to if you're wondering what is going to be on ice here. And Nashville, yeah, they're floundering. A point ahead of the Blackhawks, 7-11-3 at the bottom of the Central Division. And then let me wrap up by talking about a little baseball. No Juan Soto talk. If we listen to the last podcast, I'll get into that, so I'm not going to unpack that. You had a couple of transactions take place, though, in baseball. The first one, a bit of a surprise, and I don't know why that the Cincinnati Reds were so quick to unload Jonathan India. And listen, I'm not trying to make him out to be Joe Morgan, but for India, a guy who had won the Rookie of the Year in 2021 and was part of a bunch of trade rumors over the last couple of years, I don't know why. Maybe he and the management or front office, who knows? I don't know if he's represented by Scott Boras. Maybe he's already looking for a big payday. Come on. If he won a Rookie of the Year 3 years ago, he's now getting into the arbitration-eligible years. And maybe that's the reason why the Reds are just a mess when it comes to their front office, because they made a trade a couple of days ago where they shipped him to, of all places, where Kansas City, Brady Singer, a guy who was 9-13 with a 3.71 ERA, starting pitcher for a Royal team that made it into the postseason, but for India, as well as an outfielder, Joey Weimer. Why would the Reds get back a pitcher who was under 500? Maybe they see a lot of promise in him. Maybe they feel like, hey, we need more pitching, and if we had to part with India, so be it. But that was a trade that made me scratch my head. If anything, maybe you're going to get a young prospect. I don't know if Singer is that guy that could be I won't say a top of the rotation guy, but if he's going to be as high as a 2, maybe 3. But for India, again, I'm not making him out to be Rogers Hornsby or the aforementioned Joe Morgan. But that was a little puzzling if you ask me. So the Reds shipped them there, and I guess it had to be a thing, dollars and cents with the Reds. As we know, the Reds have been a bit of an embarrassment here over the last few years with their ownership group. And also Yusei Kikuchi, a guy that was in Toronto, got traded to the Astros at the deadline and pitched actually pretty well for the Astros when he arrived there over the last 2 months of the season and even into October. Signed with the Anaheim Angels, 3 years, $63 million, as they need pitching in the worst way, as they try to revamp everything. Whether it's the culture, rotation, who knows what's going to happen with their starting lineup. They got to get healthy there, as we all know, with Mike Trout and Anthony Rendon. So Angels are trying to do whatever it takes to get themselves back on the beam with some relevancy in the aftermath of Shohei Ohtani going up the freeway, not only winning an MVP, but also winning a World Series in the process. So let's see what the Angels do here as they try to bolster their rotation with the addition of Kikuchi. And as far as the big free agents, as we get into the month of December, I believe, let me pull that up real quick, the winter meetings for baseball, which I think they're going to take place in, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're going to take place in Arizona. It's usually Arizona, San Diego, maybe even Texas for that matter. Winter meetings 2024. They will be in Dallas, December 8th through 12th. So the good thing is that a week from this coming Sunday, as we get into Monday's podcast, which will be let me just double check that. Yes, which will be the 9th. Have my date set? Yes, because today's 25th, the 2nd. So 2 weeks from today, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of buzz, a lot of rumors, a lot of activity maybe early on with the winter meetings. And I'm going to unpack that at that time as we look to see the big free agents, whether your name is Juan Soto or the big pitchers that are out there, the Corbin Burns of the world, guys like Blake Snell. You know who the cast of characters are, as we'll get into a little hot stove at that time to warm us up as we get not only past the holidays into December, get ready for Christmas, and guess what, people? A new year will be on the horizon. So, I got you covered, even though you won't hear from me this coming Thursday, won't be on the podcast, no podcast because of Thanksgiving, but I'll be on top of it. Check my YouTube channel, which I'll get into in a second, and all of my social medias to get the latest and greatest of what's happening in the world of sports from yours truly here on the J Reels Podcast. That'll do it. Another episode just about in the books. Thank you so much for passing by. Thank you so much for stopping by to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review. Throw me a few stars, write a review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, the YouTube channel at J Reels. Please subscribe there. I'm trying to increase that visibility with that platform to get the name out, word out. Please do so. Subscribe, like, thumbs up, leave a comment. Again, sincerely and gratefully appreciate it. As you well know, or maybe you don't know, I'm an independent content creator, full-time podcaster, producing, hosting, writing. This is my job, people. No lie. And in fact, real quick, some offers for you during this holiday season. Whether it's a beverage, Olipop, drink Olipop, OLIPOP.com. Go to their website. They have a bunch of flavors, especially for the holiday season. Forget about getting those regular brands that you've grown up with and that you've come to know and love over the years. Have a healthier brand. Drink Olipop. Only 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of serving per 12 ounces in a can, as well as non-GMO ingredients that you can actually read. A prebiotic soda is good for your gut. So yeah, mix a vintage cola with some rum, or a flavorful cocktail with a tropical punch, or even banana cream. What? Banana cream? Yes, even that. They also have an apple flavor. So use that, mix that with your spirits for this holiday season. And if you do so, go to www.drinkolipop.com. You'll save 15% at checkout by using the code JReels. Please do so. Buy a case. You can buy an assorted case. You don't have to buy one particular flavor. Buy them all. Send them to your family, friends, foes, or frenemies. Share them as gifts. Buy them by the case. So if you go there, as well as betterhelp.com. We understand it's the holidays. Tough sledding. Tough going on. I can't get gifts for kids. I don't have a lot of money. I've lost a family member. Someone dearly departed, etc. I know it's tough to cope, but BetterHelp is there for you. If you go to betterhelp.com/JReels, they'll set you up, questionnaire, fill it out within minutes. Within 48 hours, somebody will get back to you. There's a laundry list of therapists that you could research, that you could select, and if for whatever reason that one didn't work out, there's plenty of others. You do not have to stick with the one that you've chosen in order for you to get yourself put together, get yourself back on the beam, to look at the positive things of life. So you have all that in front of you, and it's highly rated there on a lot of the accounts that you could look at, whether it's on Google or whatever other social media platform that you check on. BetterHelp.com does work. And one more time, if you go there, you'll get 10% off of your first month. Again, BetterHelp.com/JReels for 10% off of your first month. And then also, if you go to my YouTube page or even the website, I have discounts on Bombas socks. You'll save 25% off, especially with the Wicked premiere, the movie that just came out. There's Wicked socks. Check that out. And even for people that are my age, Consumer Cellular, go there, as you can get a discount on your cell phone if you want to pare down your debt and pare down your bill, spending hundreds of dollars a month. No, you could cut that in half by going to consumercellular.com for the latest. And all the links are on my YouTube channel and on my website. Please take advantage, people. I'll get a kickback from that. So your contribution is of the utmost importance, because whether you do or do not know, oh wait, time out, how could I forget? Hit me up on any of my socials, Apple, Spotify, or as you well know, with the podcast, as well as Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the J Reels Podcast, Twitter, JReels1, just a number. Hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion at the jreelspodcast@gmail.com or the aforementioned social media accounts, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA, talking sports since birth. And like I said, I took the leap from corporate America to do this full time. So holla at your boy, help out your boy, take a screenshot, share it with all your family, friends, foes, frenemies. Like I said, on social media, I'll post it as well, because I will continue to deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the J Reels Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the Southeast, the South End, to the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. Have a happy Thanksgiving, safe travels wherever you go. Eat, drink, be merry. Don't overdo it. As we hope to get you back come next Monday, when I'll reconnect with you guys and gals here on the podcast. And until next time on the J Reels Podcast, on the flip, baby.